So let's get right to it, starting in verse 6 of Nehemiah chapter 4. So we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had the will to keep working. Then when Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites heard that the repair to the walls of Jerusalem was progressing and that the gaps were being closed, they became furious. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night. In Judah it was said, "The strength of the laborer fails, since there is so much rubble. We will never be able to rebuild the wall." And our enemies said, "They won't realize it until we're among them and can kill them and stop the work." When the Jews who lived nearby arrived, they said to us time and again, "Everywhere you turn, they attack us." So I stationed people behind the lowest sections of the wall at the vulnerable areas. I stationed them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I made an inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord, and fight for your countrymen, your sons and daughters, your wives and homes." When our enemies heard that we knew of their schemes and that God had frustrated it, every one of us returned to his work on the wall. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half held spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers supported all the people of Judah who were building the wall. The laborers who carried the loads with one hand and held a weapon with the other. Each of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building, and the trumpeter was beside me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "The work is enormous and spread out, and we are separated far from one another along the wall. Wherever you hear the trumpet sound, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us." So we continued the work, while half of the men were holding spears from daybreak until the stars came out. At that time, I also said to the people, "Let everyone and his servant spend the night inside Jerusalem, so that they can stand guard by night and work by day." And I, my brothers, my servants, and the men of the guard with me never took off our clothes. Each carried his weapon, even when washing. Wow. You can feel the fervency. You can feel the urgency of what is going on in their situation. And I want to look at that scenario, that very real, practical, historical scenario of rebuilding the wall, and think about how can we apply those principles into our lives today. Well, Jerusalem and the people there garnered minimal attention when the wall was broken down, and they were basically dwelling in the rubble of the city. They were disheartened, disorganized, without vision or hope. Just listen again to the little jingle they made for themselves, right? "The strength of the laborer fails, since there is so much rubble. We will never be able to rebuild the wall." That was the saying of the day, Jennifer. Does that fill your heart with hope? We feeling good about that? They were just where the enemy wanted them. And that's where the enemy wants us. Discouraged, disheartened, no leadership, no vision. And when we sit there, we generally won't be hassled. The enemy's not going to bother you because you're already defeated. Jerusalem, they'd come back. The Jews were there, but they were of no problem to anybody. Totally vulnerable, so the enemies didn't worry about them. But then something changed. Jerusalem started to become a little more dangerous. The first level of the wall was accomplished. Leadership had come. There was a strong leader in Nehemiah the governor. And suddenly, Jerusalem was quite literally surrounded by enemies. If you plot this out geographically, they were to the east, to the north, to the south, to the west. These enemies of theirs geographically had come and surrounded Jerusalem. Church, you have to be able to see the correlation here. When we act defeated, when we have no vision, when there is no leadership, we are no threat to the enemy. But when we gird ourselves, I love what God said to Job, gird yourself like a man. Now, that scared Job, but that's the position that we should take. Be ready when you prepare yourself for action like those empowered by God. And you march out of these doors to enthrone the Lord on your praises lived out. Then suddenly the enemy is riled up. And he seeks to quell that which God started in us. And there are many ways indeed that the enemy will attack us. Consider Job again. His livelihood was attacked. He was attacked through tragedy, both through his family and personally. He was attacked by discouragement when even his wife said, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" Think about David and Solomon. They had sensual and physical temptations that came against them. David had a temptation for power when Satan came and tempted him to the senses. The temptation was he wanted to see the vastness and see the numbers and strength of his kingdom. The point is that every attack of the enemy seeks to derail us from our one true mission to glorify God with all we've got, to advance the kingdom and to win souls for the King. So if we listen to Hebrews 12 to 13, it says, "Therefore, strengthen your tired hands and weakened knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not become dislocated, but healed instead." Strengthen your weak hands and your weak knees. This is an interesting declaration. I think it requires a little bit of insight from us in that it doesn't say to pray to God that He would strengthen your hands and your knees, but He said, gird yourself up. Work out your salvation. Get ready to do the work.